Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Guys That Magic. This is Hunter and David again. David, say what up.
Going on, guys?
We are back with our well-promised $300 upgrade videos. This one, we're taking a look at David's $300 upgrade on Undead Unleashed with the Commander Wilhite the Rot Cleaver. David, you're doing this a little different this time. Explain to the people what's going on.
Okay, so this is the second time we've been posting a deck list for this. The first one, we had the constraint of putting an extra $100 into the Precon. This time around, we're doing an additional $300 into the Precon. So not including the original 100 or whatnot we talked about beforehand. Now, with this commander, there's kind of the obvious direction that you can go in, which I felt like was zombie tribal, and that's really what I wanted to focus on for the $100 list. However, with the $300 list, I feel like it opens up a lot more options in terms of like what kind of cards I can include in here and which ones I can't. So with that being said, I'm actually kind of steering a little bit further away from the zombie tribal this time around and more so of trying to just optimize this deck as much as I possibly can for that $300.
Okay. So, what kind of optimization are we talking about here?
All right. So one of the most important features of this deck is the commander itself. So I'm going to go ahead and read him one more time just in case people don't or aren't familiar with what he does. So Wilhelt the Rot Cleaver is 2, a blue, and a black for a legendary creature zombie warrior. It says that whenever another zombie you control dies, if it didn't have Decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. It also says at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a zombie. If you do, draw a card. So he's got really two super powerful things that are going on for him there. The first one being is that he has a token generator ability. The second one being is that we do have kind of like it's a slow sacrifice ability in that it's only going to be once per turn on our end step, but he's got a little bit of card advantage in there as well. That way we can hopefully help to dig through our deck a little bit faster and find some of the key pieces that we'll need to really get this deck going. Now, speaking about those key pieces, what we're going to be doing here is kind of starting off with our win condition and then building the deck around that. So instead of me saying this time around, instead of me saying like zombie tribal, I'm going to specifically be talking about an interaction between a couple of cards. So two of the cards that I'll be including into this deck, the first one is Gravecrawler. Gravecrawler is a single black mana for a creature zombie. It says it can't block. We don't care about that. It also says you may cast Gravecrawler from your graveyard as long as you control a zombie, which works out perfectly because our commander is one. The second card that we're going to be including here that's part of our win condition is Phyrexian Altar. Phyrexian Altar is an artifact that costs 3 generic mana. It says sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color. So if you do happen to have access to all 3 of these cards, the way that this works is that you can sacrifice Gravecrawler to Phyrexian Altar. When you do, Wilhelt will create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. You'll also add 1 black mana, or I guess you could add 1 mana of any color, but you'll want to start off with 1 black mana to recast Gravecrawler from the graveyard. You can essentially repeat this loop indefinitely because you'll always have a zombie in play, and Gravecrawler, by sacrificing it, generates enough mana for you to just recast it. With these 3 cards in play, you can create an arbitrarily large number of zombies, or you can sacrifice some of those zombies from some of the tokens that you create to Phyrexian Altar to generate what would essentially be an infinite amount of mana. You have access to both of these things. So hopefully, with that being said, if you do have, I don't know, say 100 million 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Decayed on the battlefield and 100 million mana of whatever color you want, mix and match, you should be able to win the game off that.
I think you might be able to.
Now, that in and of itself would still require that we kind of go for the combat damage aspect of things. So if it's just these 3 cards and we don't have access to anything else, we are going to kind of leave ourselves exposed unless somehow we can give these tokens haste, which, spoilers, there's no way to do that in this build. So not going around that route. But there's going to be a couple other cards that I wanted to include in here. That way we can still focus around really making an impact and killing our opponents the turn we go off with this. So super important for me to just kind of get it out the way. right off the bat, this is very much a combo-centric deck. If you don't like playing combos, I'm sorry to say it. Hopefully, you still love that $100 list. You can throw an extra $200 of zombies into that deck and just kind of have a field day with that. But I felt like I really wanted to push this in a different direction, and seeing the interaction between Phyrexian Altar and Gravecrawler, I couldn't help but include that for the $300 list.
Plus, it's still zombies, so
Still zombies. This way, you know what? We're just making a bigger horde.
exactly.
The third card that we're going to be including in this, and this is going to be kind of an alternate win con. I talked about this with the $100 list. This is going to be the Acerarak, the Archlich. Same thing. I do have Rooftop Storm in this deck, although I'm not going to lie, I was incredibly tempted to actually remove it because it is expensive. And, well, expensive mana-wise at least. But Acerarak and then Rooftop Storm allows you to essentially venture through dungeons an indefinite amount of time, so long as you choose not to go into the Tomb of Annihilation. So you have to go into one of the other two dungeons.
Yep.
All right. So we've got our win con. We've talked about option A, which is the Phyrexian Altar and Gravecrawler route. And we talked about option B, which is a Acerarak. Next thing we got to talk about is how we're going to actually make this happen, how we're going to pull this off. So we've got some tutors to talk about.
Oh boy.
The big three and kind of the traditional tutors that I have on this list are Demonic Tutor. Demonic Tutor is 1 and a black mana. It allows you for a sorcery to just search your library, grab a card, put it in your hand. Diabolic Intent, which is very similar. It's also 1 and a black. You can search your library for a card, put it into your hand. Now the downside with this one, kind of downside, is that you do also have to sacrifice a creature in addition to its cost. So keep in mind you do have to have a creature in play to sacrifice for it. And then the third, just kind of traditional tutor, is going to be Fabricate. Fabricate is 2 in a blue for a sorcery that says search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle.
So you're searching for the altar.
Typically, yes. All 3 of these want to go grab that altar, unless you already have altar in hand, in which case Diabolic Intent and Demonic Tutor can also go grab Gravecrawler. Fabricate 100% is locked in. You're going to try to grab the altar. Now, one of the wonderful things about this combo is that we can actually utilize some tutors that we normally wouldn't be able to play around with because of the fact that we actually don't care if Gravecrawler is in the graveyard. And there's some really good tutors that grab stuff and just throw it into the graveyard. So the 2 that I'm going to be including in this, the first one here is Buried Alive. Buried Alive is 2 and a black for a sorcery that says search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, and then shuffle your library. This is essentially the same thing as saying just put Gravecrawler into your hand, because you can cast Gravecrawler from the graveyard, so long as you have a zombie, which there's still plenty of in this deck. Entomb is a single black mana for an instant that says search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle. So it's faster than Buried Alive. Honestly, I think it's just strictly better for the purposes of this deck because Buried Alive is going to go grab 3. I really don't care what the other 2 creatures that you grab and throw into the graveyard are. Chances are it really doesn't matter. The Gravecrawler is what you want to be hitting with either of these cards.
I'm seeing how the combo is gonna work.
This deck is 100% just based around how can we make this thing function. We do have 3 other kind of non-traditional tutors in this deck, and these are, well, the first 2 of which, just kind of like a little hint, they have Transmute. So the first one being Perplex. Perplex is 1, a blue, and a black. It's an instant that says counter target spell unless its controller discards his or her hand, which is a pretty hefty cost to pay. Chances are, if you do use this as a counter spell, your opponent's probably not going to discard their hand unless they don't have one already. But the real reason why this card is in the deck is because it has a transmute cost of 1, a blue, and a black. Transmute says that you can discard this card, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it, and then put it into your hand. You have to be able to play this only as a sorcery, but that's totally fine. Essentially, for 3 mana, you can transmute this and you can go search for Phyrexian Altar. Muddle the Mixture is another instant. In this case, it is 2 blue. For an instant, it says counter target instant or sorcery spell with a transmute cost. You can search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card. Now, in this case, you can't go grab the Phyrexian Altar based off this because this is only going to be able to grab something that's 2 or less. I'm sorry, it's only going to be able to grab something with exactly 2. And then Perplex will be able to grab the 3, but you can still goof around. Maybe you can go and, I don't know, find one of the other tutors that we've talked about so far, like a Demonic or Diabolic or any other card that you may happen to need.
So tutor for a
example.
tutor.
Tutor for a tutor. I mean, honestly, this whole thing really is just kind of about, it's all about redundancy.
I gotcha.
The last card that I'm going to be talking about on our kind of like go and find our pieces page is Moon Silver Key. This is actually a new card from Midnight Hunt. It is 2 generic mana for an artifact. You can pay 1, tap, and sacrifice it. Search your library for an artifact card with a mana ability or a basic land. Reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle. If you absolutely need to go find a land with this, it'll do it. But you actually want to go find that artifact with a mana ability, which, funny enough, Phyrexian Altar has a mana ability on it.
That's funny enough.
So we can go grab that too. All right. So that's going to be our combo. That's how we're going to get this thing locked and loaded, trying to make sure that we can basically get this thing as fast as we possibly can every single game.
So what else have we got?
So I do have 2 kind of like, oh shit, backup cards that we're going to include in this deck. And this is going to be just in case our opponents happen to also be playing Magic and are playing some form of removal here. Gravecrawler, I really don't care if they kill. If they exile it, we might be screwed. But if they kill it, that's fine. It goes to the graveyard and we can recast it from there. So we are really in trouble, however, if our opponent gets rid of our Phyrexian Altar. So I want to make sure that we have some means of getting it back. The first card that we have here is Fortuitous Find. Fortuitous Find is 2 and a black for a sorcery. It says choose one or both. Return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand, and return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Either one of those modes probably going to be relevant. And this is really going to be a card that, in the case that your Phyrexian Altar does end up, I don't know, biting the bullet, you hopefully can be able to get it back. All right, so the other card that I'm going to mention here is Reconstruction. For a single blue mana, you get a sorcery that says return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So both of these, essentially, we're going to be playing for the same purpose. Our opponent's probably going to be playing some interaction. Keep your fingers crossed there that they are not exiling out the arena, because then you're really in a world of hurt.
All right.
So,
anything else we got in here?
Oh, of course. Well, we talked about how we're going to be tutoring for it. Now I want to make sure that we're digging as deep into our deck as we possibly can. So these next couple of cards are going to be cards that we're going to be hopefully drawing into some of our goodies with. The first one we're going to talk about is Windfall. Windfall is 2 and a blue for a sorcery. It says each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards discarded this way. Ultimately, we don't care if our hand's going to get discarded, because either A, we're discarding pieces that we can recur, or we're discarding cards that aren't relevant to our combo and hopefully drawing more cards that'll help us dig into that. The second card here is Rhystic Study. Rhystic Study is just an A+ slam dunk draw card whenever it comes to EDH. It is a little bit on the more expensive side, but I figured, you know what, it's honestly one of the most powerful draw engines in the entire game. If we want something that's going to give us the bang for our buck, there's really not a whole lot that does it better than this. Rhystic Study says 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player draws a card. I'm sorry, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. Wonderful little tax effect there. We have Brainstorm, Ponder, and Consider in this deck that I'm going to be including in here. Essentially, all 3 of these are going to be those single blue mana kind of draw spells. They all function slightly differently, but essentially what we're doing with each one of these is just kind of digging a little bit further into our library. The last card on here that's going to help us dig and hopefully not kill us in the process is Bolas's Citadel. This is a card that I really wanted to fit into this list. It's also a card that gets incredibly scary because you can kill yourself really, really quickly with this card if you're not paying attention. Bolas's Citadel is 3, a black, and a black for a legendary artifact. It says you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. And you can tap it, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. If we do manage to combo off and we don't happen to have a way for us to just kill our opponents outright, we can always tap Bolus's Citadel, hopefully hit him for 10. But this should be able to help us dig through our library a little bit more efficiently. That way we can maybe, instead of just casting like 1 or 2 things per turn, now we're just using our life as a resource and hopefully just churning that way. I will admit, I do think that Bolus's Citadel is much, much better whenever you have access to fetch lands or whenever you have access to things that have top of the deck manipulation. So things like Sensei's Divining Top, which for monetary reasons, we cannot include in this deck. So there is the potential that it doesn't quite do as much as what it possibly could here.
I gotcha. Well, this next couple of cards I'm looking at seems to be extremely, extremely mean with this combo you got going on.
Exactly. So this next couple of cards I'm going to be talking about is how we could take that infinite combo that we were talking about earlier and then just turn it into a kill that turn. So we have Zulaport Cutthroat, Bastion of Remembrance, Blood Artist, and Bantu's Monument. Essentially, all of these cards are going to drain our opponent for 1 life whenever we have another creature that gets, or whenever another one of our creatures either dies, or with Bantu's Monument, whenever we cast a creature spell, each opponent's going to lose that 1 life and then we'll gain that 1. But in either case, if we're comboing off, we're going to have a massive number of creatures dying for the sacrifice of Phyrexian Altar, and we'll also be recasting Gravecrawler an arbitrarily large number of times for Bantu's Monument. These cards are also just really genuinely good on their own, especially with a commander that likes to sacrifice things. So if we don't have our combo in play, these can at least start to drain our opponents by a little bit. And then Bantu's Monument has the additional upside where it also functions as kind of like a pseudo mana rock, and then it makes our black creature spells cost 1 less to cast.
Pretty nice.
We also need to make this deck move a little bit more quickly. So we're going to be adding in a couple of mana rocks as well as a couple of ways for us to kind of rapidly increase our mana through some rituals. So we have Demir's Signet, Chromatic Lantern, and Felwar Stone that I'm going to be including into this deck. All 3 of these just mana rocks. They tap for mana. Chromatic Lantern helps us out and further fixes our mana by allowing all of our lands to just tap for whatever they want. And then Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual, you pay either 1 or 2 mana respectively, and you generate more than that mana. So Dark Ritual, you pay 1, you add 3. Cabal Ritual, you pay 2, you add 3, or you add 5 black mana if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard instead. So both of these can help us rapidly kind of blast out some of our more expensive spells, or hopefully accelerate our early turns. That way we can get a couple of our pieces in play turn 1 or turn 2.
Man, some black spells that just get even better.
Exactly. The removal package that was included in this deck is not good straight out of the box. So we're going to try and improve that by a little bit here as well. For this, we're talking about including Reality Shift. It is 1 and a blue. For an instant, it says exile target creature. Its opponent manifests the top card of their library. I love this card. I think this card is absolutely fantastic. It's got to be one of the best blue removal spells in EDH. It's an exile effect, so it deals with even some of the most pesky creatures, and oftentimes that manifest really doesn't matter. We're also adding in good old counterspell because I feel like I just can't have a blue deck without counterspell in it.
You need it.
Exactly. We're throwing in Negate. Now, Negate is 1 and a blue. It says counter target non-creature spell. So kind of like counterspell, just can't hit creatures. But honestly, you're probably going to be wanting to keep these counters up to help you protect your combo anyways, to make sure that your opponents aren't blowing up that Phyrexian Arena or something like that. And most of the time, that's probably going to be presented through an instant or a sorcery on their end. So Negate, still very powerful here. And then also we have Delay, which is in this deck. Delay is 1 and a blue for an instant. It says counter target spell. If the spell is countered this way, exile it with 3 time counters on it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. So you're not actually technically really getting rid of whatever they cast. It is eventually going to make its way back. But this buys you several turns, and hopefully by the time that they would have been able to cast that spell, the game is over because you've comboed off and killed them. Or you've slowed them down by a significant amount with this delay that whatever they were hoping to do may no longer be relevant or even applicable to the game.
Mm-hmm.
We're also going to be including 3 non-basic lands into this deck. The first one being Clearwater Pathway, just because it's a somewhat cheap land that can come in and function as either blue or black. Fabled Passage and Shipwreck Marsh kind of also doing the exact same thing here, in that this is just a way for us to hopefully smooth out the mana base a little bit. This deck, with it being 2 colors and with us adding in the mana rocks that we are, it's not that bad.
Hmm.
And I actually have to say, straight out of the box, the mana base in this was not the worst deck I've ever seen. However, also straight out of the box, this deck is running 40 lands, which is astronomically high.
That is a lot of lands, man.
So
that's it, huh? That's the additions?
So those are the additions. Now that we've talked about the additions, we get to the good part about what all the cards I'm going to cut out of here and how I'm probably going to piss quite a people off.
All right, let's see all the cards that people really wanted to keep in the deck that you're saying goodbye to.
All right. Number 1 is Gorex the Tomb Shell. He actually was a card that I kind of debated about, but I tried to lower the average mana value of this deck as low as I possibly could, because we do have Bolus's Citadel in there, which I really want to be able to play that and have the payoff of it. So having an 8 mana spell in the deck could potentially kill us, depending on how we're doing. So Gorex is getting the axe. Eater of Hope is 7 mana for a big old turd. I actually absolutely hate this card, so that's gone just because of what it is, also because of the mana cost. Butcher of Malakir is also 7 mana, so it is incredibly expensive. Chances are it's not going to do anything relevant. Realistically speaking, we're trying to just win the game before turn 7, or before a spell like this would become relevant. Gravespawn Sovereign is 6 mana, so if you haven't noticed yet, there's kind of a trend with what I'm cutting out of this deck. It's also a card that really benefits from having a large number of zombies in play. And I know we're talking about creating an infinite horde, but this is like a large enough where I can do things with them to tap stuff down, but at the same time not large enough where I'm just killing my opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have 100 million zombies, my opponents might be screwed.
Seems that way.
Overseer of the Damned is another 7-drop that we're going to be cutting from this deck. I feel like Wizards included every black 7-drop that they could possibly find. Same thing. This is just not a card that I want in here. It's a really, really, really expensive removal spell that's stapled onto a body. And don't get me wrong, Overseer of the Damned is a perfectly fine card in and of itself if you can recur this thing or have a way to cheat it into play, but we don't, so I don't want it. Ritless Deathfang is another card in here for 4, a blue, and a black for a total of 6 mana. It's a dragon, so it's also not even a creature type that we care about. It does have a cool ability whenever we're sacrificing things, so our opponents would have to sacrifice it as well. But like I said, if our opponent has 4 or 5 creatures in play and we have 100 million, they don't have a board presence.
I think your 100 million wins.
I think so too. Army of the Damned does everything that our deck wants to do, but by costing infinitely more than what we want to do it for, so I'm going to cut that out of here as well. Ghoul's Night Out is a cute recursion piece, but I really am trying to end the game before my opponents have anything in the graveyard worth recurring. Hour of Eternity, same thing. We can have 1 million mana, and we may not have 1 million targets for this. So Hour of Eternity really doesn't do anything for this deck.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace. Zombie Apocalypse, as cool of a name on this card, literally does jack shit for this deck. We're not trying to recur a bunch of zombies. We're trying to recur a single zombie 1 million times. Curse of Unbinding. I honestly had to read this card just over again just now because I didn't even remember what this thing did. I just knew the fact that it was a 7 mana enchantment. So like just looking at that made me want to vomit. I don't like this card. The game needs to end before this is ever relevant. And then the last card that I'm going to be cutting, at least out of the too damn expensive pile, is Liliana's Mastery. This one comes in at only 5 mana, which I feel like is odd for me to say. And it just generally just doesn't do anything for our deck here. It gives zombies we control +1/+1, which is really cool, but we also have tons of lords that are still going to remain in the deck that are going to do that exact same thing. And we're going for a numbers game here. We're not trying to make our zombies really big.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of cards in this deck that I'm going to be cutting because I just don't honestly think they're either all that good to begin with, or I just don't think that they're really all that good anymore. Tomb Tyrant is the first one that's going to get the axe. This one is another zombie lord, but coming in at 4 mana and having a relatively slow ability doesn't really make this all too interesting for me. Aether Spouts is 5 mana for an instant. That really doesn't do much for me either. It's kind of like a pseudo board wipe, but even at that, it's only going to affect one of her opponents. It's not a good card. Siphon Flash is a mass removal piece, and that your opponents are going to be sacrificing quite a bit of their things, but they're going to sacrifice the most irrelevant thing to their current board presence or their overall game state, and I don't want to be spending 5 mana to kill their smallest or least impactful creature. Ravenous Rotbelly is a 5 mana zombie that we're going to be cutting from this deck as well. Same kind of thing here. It's going to be forcing our opponents to maybe sacrifice some creatures. Really, I'm not that interested in this kind of stuff. Corpse Augur is a cute draw spell. Whenever this thing dies, we'll be able to draw a couple cards off of it. But if we're trying to aim for speed with this deck, trying to hurry up and combo off, our opponents probably aren't going to have very many creature cards in their graveyard unless they're built around that synergy, in which case I wouldn't rely on a card like this anyways. So I don't want to be spending 4 mana on a card that might draw me a card. And then the other 2 cards that we're cutting from this, like, what the hell is happening in this pile, are Eternal Skylord and Gleaming Overseer. Both of these are zombies with the amass mechanic, and they have cool abilities on them. Like, one of them makes you zombies flying, and the other one gives you zombies hexproof and menace. You're not blocking this horde, so I don't care if they have flying. I also don't care if they have menace. And like, hexproof is laughable because what are you going to do? Target 1,000,000 times?
Yeah, matter of fact.
So all of those don't care about. There are a couple of cards that I am a little sad to part with just because I think that these cards are actually kind of cool. But
Are
they just
people going to get mad at you for these ones too?
probably, I think nah, they're gonna get mad at me for all of it, to be honest with you. They don't like whenever I do things with decks that aren't like the go-to.
I like it so far, but tell me what you're going to take out.
So these couple of cards, they just don't synergize quite as well anymore as what I had hoped that they would, or originally as much as what they had. So the first one being Undead Alchemist. It was kind of like a pseudo alternate win condition in the pre-constructed deck. No longer care about that. We're going to be winning with our massive number of tokens. Open the Graves is a cool card, but for 5 mana, it's kind of expensive. It's a little bit slow, and I'm really trying to drop the overall like mana value of this deck. So rather not be playing a 5-drop unless it's super impactful. So with that being said, Liliana Death's Majesty also going to go. Fantastic card.
No.
Yeah, fantastic card from Zombie Tribal, but this is not Zombie Tribal. This is combo centric. How can we kill somebody? I am going to butcher this. Alois? Nephalia Sleuth? Alois?
Alia, yeah.
Well, the Nephalia and the Sleuth I got. I have no idea what the first name on this chick is. I think it's a chick. Looks like a chick. I'm going to continue with that.
I think it's Eloise.
Eloise?
I think.
You know, I was just thinking actually, like, we get a lot of like
French?
German influences in this. Yeah, it would be really cool if we got some more like French influences with Innistrad. And I was thinking like the French Quarter, like down there on Bourbon Street. That would be dope. There you go, Wizards. Trademark that idea. Give us like a voodoo set.
Pretty sure it's Eloise.
All right, so it's got a cool ability that really synergizes with our commander, and that we would be investigating whenever one of our creatures are going to die, and that our commander wants things to be sacrificed. So it's really dope in that regard. Ultimately, though, it's still a 5 mana for our creature. It's probably not going to be doing anything super impactful until we actually go off, in which case we don't care about winning more. I just want to care about like getting to that point. Beaver Scab is another cool card that just doesn't quite make the cut here. I'm not really hoping to copy any creatures or any of my zombies. Horde Wing Scab. 5 mana for a card that's going to be a really cool zombie lord because it's going to be able to give our zombies that flying ability. No longer care about that. And its second ability, whenever zombies deal damage, don't care about that either because I'm really only trying to deal damage whenever I'm dealing millions of it. So his abilities are relevant. Stitcher Giralf, also same kind of thing here, coming in at 5 mana, so also rather expensive. Doesn't do anything whenever it enters the battlefield either. It has to tap, so this thing actually has to sit around and survive for it to do anything. And Haven Ghoul Runebinder, another one that I'm going to cut from this, coming in at 4 mana. Same kind of complaint that I had with Stitcher Geralf, to be honest with you. It doesn't do anything on an ETB. It doesn't have any kind of like passive ability. It has a tap ability on it. That's just not for me. This thing has to sit on the battlefield and survive. And if it does all of that, then it comes around for minimal gain.
Okay.
There is
I see one more card here, it looks like.
one more relevant card. This card is super, super cool. However, this thing kills us. So like it's gotta go. And that being Prowling Geistcatcher. Prowling Geistcatcher is 3 and a black for a human rogue. It says whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile it. I literally don't even care about anything else that this card says. Because if we have this in play, Gravecrawler gets exiled, which stops our combo.
That's sad.
So this card, nope. I know that sure, yeah, okay, it can recur our Gravecrawler. That's cute. Whenever this thing dies, it's going to bring it back. Don't care. Don't even want to play around with that. I'd rather just kill somebody without all that extra shenanigans and hoops to jump through. And then I don't know what Wizards was thinking with this deck with its, I don't know, 7 million land count that it originally included. But we're cutting some lands from this. And we're actually cutting a lot of lands.
How many lands are we cutting?
We're cutting 7.
Okay.
Now, before everybody gets crazy, I did include an additional 3 earlier. So what we're really doing is just dropping down by 4. We're going from 40, which is incredibly large, to 36, which I feel like might still be too high, but is at least more of a...
It seems like a sweet spot, especially with the cards that you added that does produce extra mana. So
Yeah. So hopefully you won't flood quite as much just looking at this because I don't know. I didn't play with this deck straight out of the box, but looking at the deck, it looks like it's going to flood a very large number of times.
yeah.
So we're going to be removing Demir Aqueduct, which these bounce dual land. I don't know what the name of these ones are, but like the enter the battlefield and the bounce another land back to your hand. I hate these cards unless you're playing a reanimator style deck where you're actually using that as like a pseudo discard outlet for you to be able to discard your Avacyn or some other big thing that you're going to recur the next turn. I hate these lands. They slow you down. Not only, I feel like, so like the turn that you play this, like you're so stuttered because it doesn't tap for mana. And then you're also bouncing that land back. So like, I feel like you just have nothing going on. If you play this on turn 2, like this is your turn 2.
Yeah.
We're also going to be removing 3 swamps and 3 islands from this list, so an even split there. And that's going to wrap up this $300 list.
Okay. That was a lot.
It was.
Go ahead.
So the upgrades on this deck come to $298.98 according to TCG Players market price. That is not including the original cost of the Precon. So this is just a $300 straight upgrade list. I think that's probably about as close as I could possibly make it given the constraints. Obviously, there are some cards that I really wanted to include in this list that I just couldn't do it because of the price tag associated with this that I was trying to keep it under. But all in all, it is a combo-centric deck with a lot of ways for us to be able to very, very quickly get this combo moving and grooving.
Yeah, I think this deck is pretty competitive for $300 upgrade.
I don't think it's competitive at all. I think it's tuned.
I'm just saying, if you can get this combo off, you win the game. That's pretty good. Competitive enough in your casual circles.
Yeah, check with your casual circles before you ring a combo deck, though. Some people really get salty at that shit.
Who, me?
You're one of them, yes.
Yeah, you're right. Anyways, so that's it for the video. I hope you guys liked this. Leave a comment down below saying what you would do differently in this upgrade video. Or if you really enjoyed this, hit the like button. Tell us that we did a great job. As well as check out the entire deck list that David worked on down in the description down below. Hit the subscribe button. Don't forget we are coming out with the Coven Counters $300 upgrade as well in a couple of days. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time, this is Guys the Magic. Peace.
Later.